Hello, strong medicine lesson number 3, hormesis. Hormesis is basically stress and stress exposure, and stress exposure and the demands our environment places on us that's the difference between a cow and a cheetah. A cow has no stress and demands. Cheetah has high stress and demands, but a cheetah is much more badass. As always, train your focus. Han Solo had not been focused, he would be dead. The same is true for you. It's basic concept of hormesis. So stressors are in the right amount are not only tolerable but necessary. Lack of stresses and challenges sets up a person for an early grave, obesity, chronic disease, weakness, and many more undesirable things. A good way to understand this is that retirement is the lead cause of death. If we don't have a reason to exist, we don't have something to struggle against, we lose our form and we just deteriorate. So having stressors on us, having things we need to deal with, having things to overcome, both physically, spiritually, psychologically, but very much biologically as well, is something that keeps us alive, keeps us healthy. Too much stress is bad. Too much work is bad, but too little stress or work, and we simply cease to be. We fall apart. So Parcellus said poison isn't everything and no thing is without poison. The dosage makes it either poison or remedy. So the way to understand this is anything in large enough quantity can kill you. Like water, for instance, you drink too much water, you will dilute your blood sodium content and die. It's called dry drowning. It's very common. Well, not very common, but it's most common among marathon runners. But vegetables are another example of that. Vegetables are toxic. There's all this talk today about plant defense chemicals and whether or not plant defense chemicals are good for you, or why are plants good for you? Are they even good for you? There's a lot of confusion around that. And one of the things I'm going to be clearing up in this course is what the hell to make of all of that. So the way to understand it is simply poison isn't everything and no thing is without poison. Vegetables are no different. They are some of the more toxic foods that we eat. Well, not quite. There's some definitely more toxic stuff out there than vegetables, but in terms of specific plant defense chemicals, vegetables have a lot of those. And these have an interesting effect on our bodies. One example would be like capsaicin. So you eat a bunch of spicy food and then your face gets flushed, your circulation increases. There's a lot of ginkgo biloba has properties of circulatory increase, and polyphenols create or stimulate antioxidants in our body. When you eat a bunch of things with polyphenols in it, wow, suddenly there's more antioxidants in my body. What is behind all of this? Well, polyphenols are toxic, so our body wants to deactivate them, and it produces the antioxidants to deactivate the polyphenols. But that actually, whether or not this is a good thing is something we'll cover later. But because of the toxic exposure, our body then counteracts that and kind of clears out its system a bit. You see this with a lot of herbs that increase circulation. What's really going on there is our body's increasing circulation to get rid of these things. But that also just increases circulation in general, which may or may not be good depending on what your goals are. So it's a hormetic stimulus. But hormesis, it's very necessary. Like if you do not expose your body to these plant defense chemicals, these things that have toxins in them, but that we consider food, you become very, very, very sensitive to all sorts of stressors. So when you walk around, for instance, if you go past a factory and the factory is putting smoke out, or your car, or anything, any of these stressors that we are exposed to on a day-to-day basis, any toxins or whatever, if you don't have some sort of immunity to that, some sort of response that is used to dealing with these things, your body freaks out, doesn't know what the hell to do, and you start having reactions to things. You have autoimmune reactions, and I've got some crazy stories about that. I'll probably have a case study part of this course where I can talk about a lot of my own experience and other people's experience, but specifically my own experience with these things. I've tested a lot of this stuff out, but essentially you become hypersensitive without hormetic stress, specifically from plant defense chemicals. And that's a bad thing because your body essentially gets used to existing without them, which can be good. I mean, it takes a lot of stress off of our body, and too much of these things will definitely wear us down. A lot of thyroid issues are caused by the overconsumption of leafy green vegetables for various reasons. But if we don't expose ourselves to any of these things, then we become hypersensitive. And then any dietary stressor specifically, but other stressors as well, will just wipe us out. So a great example of strengthening ourselves in response to stressors is Milo of Croton. Milo starts off carrying the calf and the cow and finally the bull as the cow grows up. And this is a good thing. I mean, this is a stressor, obviously. It's like, oh no, he's carrying this cow. It's a difficult, stressful thing to do. Well, yes, it is, but now he's become more resilient. So by exposing himself willingly to the stressor, when someday he gets jumped by a bunch of dudes, he'll just beat the crap out of them because he's already used to dealing with stressors. He's exposed himself to them enough that he's become stronger. If he never did that, though, then he could get beat up by an angry 5-year-old. And that's not where you want to be, because the world is dangerous. The world is deadly. You don't want to cloister yourself away from toxins to the point where you start reacting to dust. It's not possible. You can't remove yourself from the world. And really, we're going to tie this back to oxidative stress and inflammation. Hormesis, exercise, all of these stressors, anytime we say stressor, it's kind of a coded word for oxidative stress. Oxidative stress is really the fundamental currency of stress: psychological stress, physical stress, emotional stress, dietary stress from leafy green vegetables, for instance, herbs and spices, garlic, for instance, incredibly toxic, but it allows our body to adapt to these things and thus become more resilient. So we want to eliminate oxidative stress, because by eliminating oxidative stress, we really eliminate our ability to deal with stress. And stress is an inevitable part of life. We can't get away from it. So we might as well adapt to it. And we do that by controlling the dosage. So this is a nice graph of how this works. Here we have, I talk about too little exercise induces no change or adaptation, while too much exercise results in overtraining. Same is true for hormesis. If we expose ourselves to too much stress, we can't adapt. And then we start to break down. Where we expose ourselves to too little stress, we don't strengthen ourselves enough. Plant defense chemicals stimulate hormetic adaptation, and thus the right dose will stimulate health, and overdose will jeopardize health. A diet free from hormetic stress can be an essential part of healing for those whose systems are radically and chronically overstressed. So a lot of the current popularity of the carnivore diet is, in my belief, and I'll get into this in much more detail, but part of it is hormetic stress. By removing all hormetic stress, we can let our bodies heal. And this is especially good if we're very, very, very ill, because the illness itself produces more stress. So we just end up we just can't essentially, we can't overcome the stress because there's just too much of it. So we just start dying. It's very tragic. I call it progressive failure syndrome. Yeah, we'll talk more about that, but eliminating hormetic stress, especially from diet, can be very, very useful. I don't really believe in eliminating hormetic stress from exercise, because like this shows, hormetic stress is necessary, but with certain systems, especially diet, taking away the hormetic stress can be very good, because autoimmunity starts in the gut, because most of our immune system is in our gut, as we went over previously. And that can be very, very beneficial. We'll go over that more later. But for this slide, I'm going to show you these graphs. So the hormetic window is the optimal window of when you're good, like when you have enough of the stressor that you have adapted. It's gonna be exercise, sunlight exposure, like literally any stressor, stress from work, anything. I mean, even like relationships. Peterson talks about this. If your relationship is too easy, it will end, because you want a challenge. But if it's too stressful, it will also end, because no one fucking wants that shit. So, and here we see that with death. So too little stress, and it's just death. I can't think of an example off the top of my head right now of a human being actually dying. Like if we just took all the stress away from a person, like I guess like if you put you in like a pod and just like you're floating in like perfectly balanced water and like they're like mainlining all the nutrients and everything you need right into your body. Honestly, yeah, I think the body would, yeah, actually, in this scenario, this is a good example. The body would die because it would become dysregulated. Like our body's regulatory mechanisms actually work in response to stress. So without stress, our body wouldn't know what to do. It would be like, okay, like what should my blood sodium balance be? What should the neurotransmitters be? What should my heart rate be? What should any of this stuff be? How much liver enzymes should I produce? It just wouldn't know because there's no stress to orient itself around. There's no direction. So it would just simply deteriorate. I mean, we need a stressor to provide ourselves with a unifying force. Without essentially stress is environment. Without an environment, then our body is not a unity, but a loose collection of different organ systems. And then they would just all go in different directions. But when you apply a stressor to the body, that creates necessity for all these systems to work together, which keeps us alive. So that actually, while I can think of no example off the top of my head of that actually ever happening to a person who was put in a pod in this scenario, because that we don't do that. But that's a good way of understanding is that we orient ourselves and organize ourselves and unify ourselves in response to a stress. I mean, even you look at like a country that has no stressors will just fall apart. The fastest way to unify a country is to attack the country. I mean, you attack the country too much, it's bad for the country, obviously. I mean, you destroy the country, but if the country has no stressors whatsoever, then it will also fall apart because there's really no reason for it to exist. Great way of understanding this. So here we have another graph that shows the same basic idea. So the idea of hormetic overdose. So hormetic overdose is just anytime the stressor is too much, and this can change. What was a good stressor today could be too much of a stressor tomorrow. And that could have to do with sleep quality, relationships, unprocessed emotional trauma, physical training, drug use, shallow breathing, lack of sunlight, messed up macronutrient ratios, messed up electrolyte balance, too little water, too acidic water, too basic water, like anything that dysregulates us and forces our bodies to re-regulate itself against that dysregulating force is a stressor. And if we're overstressed, underslept, all of these things, then a stressor that was good yesterday could be bad today. So, for instance, you're training, let's say you're a weightlifter. You go to lift weights at the gym and you didn't sleep like at all the night before, then that actually might fuck you up. It would actually put you more into this overdose range because you are overstressing yourself. Whereas yesterday, that same workout routine could have been a great thing because you had more sleep. So, in a sense, it's not that the total volume of stress the total volume of stress you're exposing yourself in this specific instance has decreased. It's that the ability to handle that stress is decreased. And we'll get into that more in the next video.